that is good because we record the sessions. So if you happen to have to miss a session, which hopefully you don't, but you will be able to catch up, or if you want to go back and review something that we said at any point, you'll be able to do that. So we'll provide them and make them available through our learning management system, which I'll take you through shortly. Little content warning, we do show some road crash scenes, nothing overly graphic, but just a flag that if that's something that could disturb you. Okay, so we use Zoom webinar, as you're probably discovering. So you won't have been able to talk to us, but you should be able to chat to us through the chat function. So hopefully you can see that. And as you see there from the little diagram over here, you have the ability to chat to everybody or just hosts and panelists. We do like it if you put your questions in and make it available to everybody to see, or put your comments in. It's a bit of good discussion behind the scenes sometimes. So feel free to do that. But that's predominantly the way we will communicate with you or ask you to ask your questions through the chat function. Chat function. Q&A can work if for some reason the chat isn't working for you, or if you did want to ask something anonymously, you could put it through the Q&A. And we do have available a hands up option, which is where we can give you the ability to unmute yourself and talk. There's no ability for you to put a camera on it at all, but we can do that. We just prefer the webinar version just so we don't get the dogs barking in the background and people forgetting to mute and, you know, a colleague shouting at them or something. So that's generally how we do that. In terms of the admin logistics of the course, we've got Kez here to help out. Hello, Kez.
Hello.
And Kez will sort of be behind the scenes during the live session and monitoring the chat and just making sure I'm covering off everything. She'll also be collating the prize winners, which I'll explain shortly. But in terms of admin logistics stuff throughout the course, the best thing to do is use that email address of training@safesystemsolutions.com.au, and they will log your concern or be able to help you very quickly. But of course, you can email me at any time if you're having any issues. And did I miss anything there from that background, Kez?
No, I don't think so. Just that, yeah, just contact the training team, or you can copy myself in as well. At Safe System Solutions, and then we'll pop it in the chat even, and I'll be keeping an eye on everything and be in the background trying to sort everything out for you.
Thanks, Kez. And yes, that interesting sound has reappeared. But that's all right. That was Kathy. Okay, on to me. My name's Ken Beer, for those I don't know. I'm the principal engineer at Safe System Solutions. So before Safe System Solutions, I was in government doing a lot of the road safety engineering, road safety audit, safe system assessment, sort of early works in the development of the whole process, and a variety of other things. There's a link to my LinkedIn or a QR code to my LinkedIn if you'd like to connect there, or to try to put out information about road safety engineering and road safety in general. My contact details are there. I'm available to have one-on-one catch-ups with people or chat about different things throughout the course or after the course for that matter. So I'm your sort of go-to for any of the technical aspects of safe system assessment. Now, we use a learning management system, and some of you will have used it before for the road safety audit course with us, or through other courses, cycling infrastructure, or these sort of ones. and you may have used it from other courses you've done, but you need to access the learning management system in order to pass this course. So you need to make sure you have received that email, which would have come from Safe System Solutions. So check your junk if it didn't arrive, and then you need to log in, and that is where you will do your quizzes, you do your assignments. That's where, yeah, everything is housed in terms of the resources and recordings. So it's pretty important you get access to that. So as I say, if you haven't got access to that, you need to respond to the email that got you this far. So you must have got something to get you where you are. Or yeah, contact myself if you need. I'll take you through the learning management system at the end of the course, just to show you where the quiz is and those sort of things. Okay, we have a few little tricks up our sleeve to keep you engaged. One of them is our friend Wally the Wombat here. So Wally the Wombat warning sign. And the aim of the game is to count how many times this sign appears through the slides of each module. So we're doing one module today, and you will count how many times you see that Wally. And that one is not included. So your Wally count is 0, but that's just showing you what it looks like. It won't be that big, but it'll be somewhere on the slides. So that'll be one thing to keep an eye out for. We also do give out prizes. We try to incentivize you to ask questions, answer questions. We have a few case studies where we ask for somebody to put their hand up and we unmute them and they can have a chat with us. And as I mentioned, we do run a little bit of trivia. It could be general knowledge trivia, it could be road safety related trivia. Kez will ask some trivia questions before the session starts. Try and get you in early, get yourself settled, and chances to win prizes there. Now, how do you get your prizes, you might be asking? Well, you will, at the end of the course, assuming you successfully complete the course, which my aim is to ensure that you do, you'll get your certificate electronically, but then you'll also get a hard copy of it and any prizes you've won along the way in the post. And the requirements to successfully complete that this course is that you attend 4 out of the 5 live webinars and that view the one you miss. If you have to miss one, we'd like you to attend all live so you can interact, so you can ask questions, so you can do the little activities we have in the sessions. We need you to successfully complete all the tasks, and we've got quizzes and assignments and little exercises. And the benchmark is 80% in terms of the competency. And that's might sound high, we don't shy away from that, but nothing in the tests or the assignments or anything that you won't get covered in the sessions. Nothing is incredibly complex, so you should be able to get to that. You have 3 attempts at everything, and you have this offer of one-on-one coaching. So if you're really struggling to get your head around something, you always have that ability to get in contact, and either myself or one of our senior engineers will be able to have a one-on-one session and coach you and help you build up to that competency level we require. So lots of support available to you, and you simply just need to email that training@safesystemsolutions.com.au or myself or whoever you got the email from to get you here, and we'll be able to help out. I think that's about it before I eventually get into some content, but as I'll let, if there's anything you think I've missed, I will though take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands we're running this training on in this virtual world. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Kez, do you think I missed anything there?
No, I don't think so. I'm just going to sit back in the prize bit and listen in. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, so you can see there, because this is in the prize pit. So yeah, prizes could be anything. So hopefully the chat is working for people. We haven't had anybody pop anything into the chat. And oh, there we go. Simon's done it. Yeah, Simon gets a prize for being the first one to test out the chat. So there you go. Easy as that to win a prize, and we've got a few others jotting in there. That's good. That assures me that when I ask you questions, you'll be able to answer it through that. Or if you've got a question, that you will ask that question in the chat. Now, I flag probably best to write your question in as you think of it, rather than waiting for me to say, does anybody have any questions about that? Because the time for you to type and the pause, and I'll have moved on, and then we'll be, back and forth. And yeah, so jot it in as you think of it. And if we cover it, then we'll just skip through that. So yeah, pop any questions you've got in about the admin, the logistics of the course. I think we've got around 30 people, John, yeah, it's something around that. So why a wombat? Great question. Wally the wombat, we like the alliteration of it, the two W's. That's about all I've got as a reason. Okay. But nice to see a little bit of use of the chat there, and I really do encourage that. It's the huge advantages of online training is that we can do it from different places, and there's no travel required and those sorts of things. But one of the downsides is we don't get that wonderful sort of lunchtime interaction and chats and those sort of things. So we try and use this chat as a little bit of a supplement for that. Okay. So we are here to discuss safe system assessments, and New Zealand is in an interesting position where road safety audits and safe system assessments are merging together at the moment, and some of you will be very aware of the safe system audit guidelines. Essentially a safe system audit really just takes a safe system assessment, and you do that up front, and then you do road safety audit after. So you can have those sort of two distinct elements. They sort of get pushed together, and you get a little bit of efficiency out of that. But this is highly relevant for anybody who's doing those safe system audits or trying to get into that, or if you just want to do a safe system assessment off its own back. But the other I suppose, important thing to understand is that in order to do a safe system assessment, there's the sort of mechanics of the safe system assessment. And I will be taking you through that in module 4. But more importantly is the philosophy of a safe system assessment, or the philosophy of the safe system, because you really need to have a good grasp of that in order to make meaningful assessments and provide meaningful assistance to project teams. So we do spend the first part of this course just re-establishing what the safe system is. And some of you will probably say, oh, I've done that, and done that every week for the last 3 years. It will be a little bit of a tweak on some of the things you've probably heard over and over again. Some of you, it might be the first time, but I will be contextualizing it certainly in a safe system assessment way. Anyway, we'll get to all of that. So this module for today, we want to talk about those principles and elements of the safe system. We're going to talk about kinetic energy thresholds of different crash types, and the difference between traditional approaches to road safety and the SAFE system. We'll go into some best practice around behavioural change and vehicle safety interventions, and give some reasons why speed is so critical to the SAFE system approach. So we do cover off a bit, just a little bit outside of the physical infrastructure. And the reason for that is that the SAFE system assessment does have the ability to be wider than just an infrastructure assessment. So that's one thing. It's also, I suppose, an important thing for road safety practitioners to have a good understanding broadly of what is evidence-based and what works and what doesn't in road safety across the board, in order to have those sort of meaningful conversations with either the community or colleagues or other stakeholders. So there's a WALI. So I'm being nice here. Your WALI counts 1. Easy as that, eh? Right. So Aotearoa is absolutely committed to the SAFE system. You'll see there, Road to Zero, the New Zealand government's road safety strategy 2020 to 2030. Lots of commitment to the SAFE system approach to road safety, whatever that is, and we'll get to that. But there's a couple of things I just grabbed out of there I thought were quite interesting. So you'll see there a few different things, but one of the ones, percentage of people who have completed an approved SAFE system training course. So that's this is one of those. And percentage of infrastructure projects that have been subject to a road safety audit and or SAFE system assessment. So they're really key performance indicators under the Road to Zero strategy for New Zealand are sort of how much capability capacity is being built and how much are we seeing applied to infrastructure projects. Okay, so look, I'll give you a little bit of a story. The SAFE system has been around for a bit of time, and actually, I think, Kez, I'm going to give a prize for the person who can tell me the year that the New Zealand government first committed to this idea of the SAFE system approach to road safety. Yep, have your guesses. No, by the way, in the live course, you don't lose any marks. There's nothing that's marked in the live course. It's all, anything that's marked is afterwards. So you can have 3 guesses. And there we go. We'll look, yep, got some good guesses coming in. Nobody's sort of hit the nail on the head yet, but oh, we're going to go, oh. I'm going to give Thomas and we'll give Thomas the prize. 2004 is about right. 2004, 2005-ish, but Kez, I'll give it to Thomas. 2004. So it's been around a while, but let me take you back to 2004 when this was being discussed. So I was in the Victorian government at the time, and we're doing a lot of stuff with Austroads, and of course, New Zealand being an Austroads member was very much involved in the conversations. And so the SAFE system idea had come up. It's been sort of taken from European countries that were adopting it, and we're trying to understand, well, how do we shape it for the Australian and New Zealand context? And this diagram was produced, and right at the middle of this, it says there, you can't read it, human tolerance to physical force. So that was the sort of starting point to say, how much force can humans handle before they break? And then it was, the idea was, we'll look at the roads and the roadsides, the vehicles and the speeds. And that will be our system. And we will use those levers to create a system where humans can tolerate the forces generated and imparted on their body. And that was it. The circle was sort of drawn around that. And there wasn't any of that periphery around it. And people looked at it and thought, okay, that's interesting. And then somebody said, hang on, I think we've missed a very important element here. And that's sort of human behavior and getting the humans to act better. And then there was a bit of a divide. And so sort of half the camp got on the side of saying, well, we think the system should be impenetrable to human mistake. And the other saying, no, you can't have a safe system without a safe user of that system. And then the debate went on, and then eventually there was this sort of compromise reached with this square put around it that said, you know, alert and compliant road users. And that was an interesting thing to do. Generally sort of now considered a failure, because that's the easiest sort of get out clause you've got, to just say, well, that road user wasn't alert and compliant or compliant, and thus a crash has happened. So we can pretty much sort of easily push back blame to the individual road user on almost every crash. And I've lost count of the number of fatality investigations that I've done in my career. And I really that 500, maybe 700. And I can really only think of two where I find it hard to blame the road user. One was where a tree fell on top of their car randomly out of, so that's, you know, I can't quite, you know, find a blame to that. Although if you really wanted to, you probably could. But the point being that we don't progress our system if we just take that attitude that everybody has to be absolutely spot on, alert and compliant the whole time, because humans just make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. They're usually very minor. I've made many mistakes already this morning, as you have. They're all been very minor, I'm sure, and you haven't had any major consequences of that. But that's what we do as humans. Anyway, so then that sort of diagram evolved, and we saw lots of diagrams springing up, lots of circles, and they're all generally the same. And but I think the latest Aotearoa one is pretty exciting. I like it. I like some of the terminology. I like whoever's crafting the specifics of the words, because they do tell quite an interesting story. I'll pause and I will take you through these very briefly. I know I'm just covering stuff that some of you know very well. What have we got there? It was discussed in the 1980s, but under a different brand. Yeah, I'd debate that. There was, the Europeans were starting to have some discussions of some things associated with it, but I think it's a, yeah. I mean, I to a degree, I think that we're thinking potentially along the same lines, but the one thing that a lot of people will often say to me is that, oh yeah, no, the safe system is, yeah, it's just a rebranding of good road safety practice that we've always been pushing. No, it is not. And we've been doing a lot of stuff for a lot of time that's been good, but this is a fundamental shift in the thinking. We'll play that out. But okay, so we see here the vision right in the middle there. A New Zealand where no one is killed or seriously injured in road crashes. And then we've got the elements of that system, the way that we can lever that and create that using the infrastructure improvements and speed management, the vehicle safety, work-related road safety, road user choices, system management. But really the key thing is here, and I'd say that, we might find other levers for achieving some of this, and that's all fine. The principles are the most important. And here we go. We strengthen all parts of the road transport system. So it's not just thinking about the roads and roadsides or the vehicles, but it's trying to strengthen all these aspects. We design for human vulnerability. This is one of the biggest shifts, huge shift in thinking, and certainly was not being done in the 80s or even talked about in the 80s. Well, a little bit, but no. I mean, the idea is that human vulnerability and the vulnerability to physical force is a design parameter now. Like the same way you would have a 1 in 100-year flood, that you're designing to, or the L4 lux level, you'd have your lighting designed to. But now we have the specifics of the vulnerability of crash as a design parameter. And we know that for different crash types that can occur, and I'll take you through that. We have a shared responsibility for improving safety, so that takes that no one can void themselves of responsibility, and in the end you find that the system designers are ultimately responsible. So yeah, there's been many years where we say it's been ingrained into road safety that we say that the road user has the ultimate responsibility. You're out there, you're in control of the vehicle, you're ultimately responsible for safety. Well, we're shifting that. The thing is that we, as system designers, not necessarily, I'm not talking about like road designers, I'm talking about the whole system that we've set up. We are ultimately responsible. Our actions are grounded in evidence and evaluated. So in road safety, it is just amazing how much myth there is out there. People coming up with things that they've overheard, or some people's theories, and they run with it, or also personal experience. Like people have driven for a long time, or walked or cycled for a long time, and they'll use that as their justification for doing things, their experience. That is not a representative sample. That is not evaluated. That's not that's a personal opinion. It can be insightful and helpful sometimes, but we really need to look at evidence and proper evaluations and make decisions accordingly. Road safety is one of the worst areas for that personal opinion. And any of you have worked in any areas where you receive correspondence from the public, or you interact with the public around road safety, which I know a lot of you do. I mean, just keep track of the amount of times people start their statement with "I've been driving for," or I've been driving for 40 years, or I drive 1,000. I drive 100,000 kilometers per year, and then that is their sort of justification that what they're about to say is strong and robust from an evidence perspective. It's absolutely not, right? But it doesn't work when you come back at them with statistics 101. You just sort of have to acknowledge and then sort of move your point along. Road safety actions support health, well-being, and livable places. So this is kind of ingenious from the New Zealand government, because there's a big recognition that there is so much interplay between health, well-being, and livable places and good road safety outcomes, and that there is sometimes a lot more appetite for that those initiatives that increase those specifics than road safety. And I'll explain that a little bit later. We make safety a critical decision-making priority and promote good choices, but plan for mistakes. Okay, so I see a little bit of stuff coming into the chat. Is there any classification between minor mistakes, attention diverted momentarily, adjusting radio, etc., and major mistakes, drink driving, excessive speed, eating a bowl of cereal? Yeah, so I'll show you in one of the slides coming up where there's been a bit of investigation into specific errors that happen to road users and how we categorize those. I sort of think about it as end result. What's the end result? Well, if it's somebody death or seriously injured, yeah, is there a way that we could have intervened regardless of what the specifics were? But it gets a bit complicated, but I'll talk to that. So Anatoly's popping in there. Yeah, so yeah, there were certainly elements that we take now as the safe system being explored and looked at, and it sounds like you were involved in some of that but for quite a while, which is good. I suppose that holistic package and the way that it's looked at wasn't something that was nicely articulated. Yes, everybody is a road safety engineer. That's that's a very good statement. Wouldn't personal opinion influence behavior? Yep. Yep, I think that's a good point as well. Okay, I'll keep moving on. Suppose we look at road safety in a particular way, in a particular light, and sometimes our opinion and public opinion of road safety is very sort of skewed in the way we look at it for a number of reasons. We've evolved with the system we've got. You grew up with it, and that's sort of, it's hard to see anything else. But if you just look at some other industries, you sometimes get an insight into a bit of this strange world that we accept in terms of the road transport system. So let's look at manufacturing. Let's look at widget production. I know some widgets that they're making. And if we look at a safety culture ladder, which is a pretty sort of basic safety thing, we see there the bottom of the safety ladder is a pathological safety culture where we say it's up to everybody to protect themselves the best they can. And so in the factory setting here, it's that there's workers and there's machines and there's danger all around, and they will get some training and they'll be told what to do and what not to do, and don't put your hand in there because that's dangerous, and don't stand in this area because you could get crushed. And sometimes there's kids who clean the machines and they're told what to do and what not to do, and there's often particular areas where only some workers are allowed to go because it's more dangerous, and sometimes they go out and have beers at lunch and they come back, and these sort of things happen, and it's an inherently unsafe area, and the responsibility for safety is pushed back to that individual. Yes, with some instructions, but it's their responsibility. You elevate up from that to what we call a reactive safety culture. So as particular machines in the factory repetitively rip arms off or crush kids and the like, they start to look and say, well, we've got to do something about that machine. So they put a guard on it, or they do other, some system to stop people being able to stand in that area. And then we elevate up from that to a calculating safety culture, which is where you start to look at expenditure to enhance your productivity by investing. So it's essentially saying, how much time are we losing with machines that have down because we're pulling body parts out of them, or how much do we have to pay out to these families of workers, and how much does it cost to retrain a worker to then take that spot, and calculate all of that. And you say, well, we're losing X amount of dollars, and if we actually do investment in protective equipment on some of these machines and other changes, we can actually improve our productivity and our widget production by Y amount. And if we take them as an equation, we back in the day it would have been like, oh, invest £30,000 and we'll get £90,000 in return on widget production. And we've come up with a thing called a benefit cost ratio, and we get a benefit cost ratio of 3 for this. So it's a good investment, and off they go and they invest. So that's a sort of calculating safety culture where the economists start to get involved. But then you get up to what we are aspiring to with a safe system, which is a proactive safety culture, where it says we need a very high level of safety, and we can produce widgets up to whatever amount we can within that envelope of safety. And if we go over that, we have to stop widget production until we're back in the safety envelope, or slow widget production down. And then you have to invest very heavily in maintaining that, maintaining the culture, maintaining the whole system that sits around it. So when we look at road transport, and I'm sure you're already making this connection, and even some of the words I've popped in there are a little bit road transport related rather than widget production related. But we see the Aotearoa network, I would say, has elements of pathological safety culture. Absolutely. Like, it is very well known that it's very dangerous on the roads, or there's a lot of risk out there. And people are given licenses and told, yeah, you have to protect yourself out there. And that's a pathological safety culture, to give people licenses and send them off to into an unsafe system. There are reactive elements, and lots of intersections and lengths being treated because crashes have happened. There's a crash history there. There's calculating. Certainly love a benefit cost ratio, and that's been done a lot. And there are elements of proactivity in out there, and we're seeing some more and more of that sort of entering into the New Zealand way of operating, which is good to see. School speed zones, I think, are an interesting, very early proactive road safety treatment that you wouldn't categorize into calculating or reactive, pathological. I mean, they squarely nicely sit in proactive. And why is that? Well, if you do a traditional transport benefit cost ratio analysis, economic analysis of school speed zones, you'll discover pretty quickly that they are just a horrible investment. But the basics of that is that you simply calculate the travel time cost, which per vehicle is minuscule, maybe 3 seconds through a school speed zone or something like that, compared to going the free flow travel speed, and you multiply that by all the vehicles that go through there every school day and all the time it's operating, and multiply that for many years, and you get this big sum of time, which you then multiply by a hourly rate for the average New Zealand person. I can't remember what the figure is, $88 an hour or something, in terms of productivity to the economy if people can work, and you get this whopping figure of cost. And then you say, well, what's the benefit? And then you put a dollar value to a kid's life using the Bureau of Economics or Transport Economics data that they put dollar value to human life, and they work out how many kids are predicted to be killed based on how many were killed, and how many are expected to be killed in the future, and how much benefit are we going to get, how much reduction in that are we going to get from putting in these school speed zones, and you get a small dollar value out of that, and you compare the two, and you get a really bad benefit cost ratio. There's just not enough kids that will be killed, and and then we just go, that's so grotesque. You just don't do that. You don't accept that. But we do that all the time for other road users, and it's just that we push the responsibility back to them and say, well, if you behave yourself and you are always alert and compliant, there won't be any crashes. Anyway, I think you're sort of getting the point I'm trying to make here, that because we've grown up with the road transport system around us, used it, and it is the way it is. And if you've got to this point in life, you've survived it. You have a certain lens on it. It's very hard to shake that lens. But looking at other industries, you can even do it with other transport, rail, aviation, sea shipping. The rate of death and serious injury per kilometre travelled or per user, we're just poles apart in road transport. Okay, so, gee, we've got lots of comments coming in. This is great. Yeah, okay, so influencing opinion, different parts. So yeah, the engineers are playing different part. That's a good comment. Yes, yeah. Reducing the consequence of undesirable behaviour, I think, is a good one. Driver training, licensing as a principle of the Road to Zero. Yeah. So if we perpetuate driving culture that we have always accepted, we will battle to change it. Yeah, I think that you'll see, and I'll talk about this shortly, like there's some understanding and acceptance that people are people, and yeah, we can get some minor improvements, but across the board, we're really just fighting an uphill battle to change people in really substantial ways, and that we need to change the system around them. But I'll explain that a little bit more. And it's not absolutely sort of clear cut, but certainly the idea that our fix to road safety is to make people better drivers, we've shifted away from that. That's not. We need to take the humans that we've got, because the humans of tomorrow are pretty much going to be the humans that we've got now, and we need to create a system around them where death and serious injury isn't the inevitable result. Same way we've got the same humans, using aviation and using shipping and using rail, and we're not seeing anywhere near the death and serious injury. And it's very complex as to why that is. Certainly, access to the system and who's controlling bits and pieces, but nonetheless, they're both transport systems. Yeah, so John's jumping straight into some specifics of ways that we can be considering the error that's going to happen, that we know is going to happen. So road safety auditing undertaken early design phase can ensure the potential design issues are designed out before the design reaches construction. So that's absolutely part of the great thinking. Yep, promote good choices but plan for mistakes is in there. Good. Yeah, the 3 E's, I mean, the 3 E's are simply levers to start to, so that's, you know, education, engineering, and enforcement. They're simply levers to, you know, as part of the way we are trying to operationalize those principles. That's the principles are the key thing. The mechanisms and the levers for how to get to those, I'm not, like, I'll certainly focus on different aspects of that, but yeah, how you get there, as long as we're achieving those principles, is important. Yeah, so a good bit of chat going on behind the scenes. I like it. I'm going to keep moving on. I'm going to get you to do a little bit of something shortly. Oh, it looks like I might get you to do a little bit of something now. Oh, yep. All right. And I have asked some of you this before in one of the questions, but I think we're going to pop a poll up on the screen. Now, remember, you're not being marked on this. This is just for you to interact. The first few questions you will have, we've talked about. Actually, the first question we've talked about, and the second question we haven't, but you can have a guess at it. So the wording of the principles is a little bit different to exactly how we discussed it, but that's a good check that you're understanding sort of the principles we're talking about, not just being able to parrot back words.
Good mix of guesses on the Usain's Bolt's world record there.
Sorry?
So a good range of guesses on the Usain Bolt's world record.
Yes, we've got a bit of variety there, which is good. All right, we'll give it a couple more seconds and then we'll stop that. And I'll talk to those. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's have a share of those results. So looking pretty good there in terms of that first one. So yeah, which of the following is not key principle? So aim for no mistakes on the road. Well, we've acknowledged that that's unachievable because humans are in control of the system. Maybe in a couple hundred years they're not, but or maybe less than that, who knows? No, not even the people who are absolutely professionals in those sorts of automated vehicle areas can give me any definitive sort of time frame on anything. We acknowledge that mistakes are going to happen. So what we like to term it is minimize and manage. So try and minimize those mistakes, but manage the outcomes. And Usain Bolt, so yeah, we had a bit of variety there, as you say, Kez. The answer was 44 kilometers per hour. Usain Bolt crossed the finish line, his world record 100 meter sprint at 44 kilometers per hour. So some of you at the 34, maybe you were trying to quickly work out the speed based on the distance and time, but you had to sort of accelerate up a bit. 44 kilometers per hour. And as the analogy goes that I've given to some of you before is, if we park the car at the end of Usain Bolt's lane, and he ran down there, he was traveling at 44 kilometers per hour and he hit that, would he survive? And the answer is yes. Most likely, he would survive. He's very, very well built, Usain Bolt, and he'll handle a good amount of force. And there's a decent correlation between maximum running speed and the ability to run into solid things in terms of tolerance to physical force of a human. So you can test that out by running a tree yourself and at full speed, and you'll survive that. You'll mess yourself up a little bit, but in the long term, you should recover and lead a normal, healthy life. So that's kind of how we evolved. That's our force. Yeah, so we can start to think about forces like that to understand what are some of these design parameters. So if I have a look at this graph here, many of you will have seen this before. Could use it quite a bit. So fatality probability, that's chance of death. And down here, we've got collision speed. That is the speed of impact, not the speed limit, just the speed of impact. And so this one is for passenger vehicles striking pedestrian. And this is, for all of society. So we've got, very frail people. We've got Usain Bolt-like people, and we've got everything in between. There's the great man himself. He sort of came in somewhere up the curve a bit. But we see there that there's sort of interesting shape of this. It really sort of starts to kick up exponentially around that 30 kilometers per hour. So after about that 30 kilometers per hour, things start to go really bad really quickly. And hopefully that's streamed for you. That's the kind of stuff that we're able to survive. He's all right. He broke a few ribs, but then he came back next year. He won the gold medal. So that's what we're designed for. But we have this information for different crash types. So this is a right angle crash. We've got bullet vehicle. This is the bullet vehicle. And this is the target vehicle. And the bullet vehicle speed, you see around the sort of 40, 50 kilometers per hour. Things go really bad really quickly after that. That's, a bullet vehicle striking the driver's side or the passenger side if it's passenger there. And then head-on crash, we have this around the 70 kilometer per hour mark, where things go really bad really quickly. That's 70 kilometers per hour for each vehicle. So you might call it like a closing speed of 140 kilometers an hour. The actual force exerted on the individual of those vehicles is a 70 kilometer per hour crash, the same as crashing into a wall at 70 kilometers per hour, assuming we've got same mass of vehicle, same travel speed. So happy to, well, I won't expand on that now because that takes a little bit of time, but there's actually a really good Mythbusters episode that does that. They crash cars into each other and then they crash cars into brick walls with accelerometers in them and show that the forces are the same. I wonder if we could share that, Kez. Nothing like watching Mythbusters on work time. Yeah, so we might try and pop that into the learning management system. Also, throughout this course, you'll see this little symbol pop up occasionally, and that is just where we've done a little bit more expanding on a topic like this, or we've got some other videos or those sort of things. So if you download the PDF set of notes, which you get from the learning management system, and you click on that hyperlink, it'll take you to somewhere with maybe a little bit more info on something like this. When we get to safe system assessing, sort of jumping down a few modules now, we actually quantify the severity outcome we expect on a scale of 0 to 4. So we imagine a crash, we predict a crash, we predict that type of crash, how it's occurring, and then we predict the speeds of bullet vehicles And we're able to then sort of put a score to it between a 0 and a 4. And this little chart is trying to help out with a bit of that. It's, you know, it's only for guidance, and you use your professional judgment. You can see a variety of more crash types. And we've got speeds up here, but you can sort of see there, pedestrian versus car. Well, 20, we're giving sort of a 1 or a 2, and then up here around the 50, it's definitely into the 3s, and anywhere up from that, we're into the 4s. And so that's, yeah, that's a way that we're able to start to help with our quantifying, which is part of the assessment methodology. What do we got here? Comment. These speeds are designed for men, not for women or pregnant women or small children. Need better crash test dummies, a system not designed for all ages. So that's not actually right. So what you're talking about, Peter, are the vehicle crash test scenarios that are for men, or the crash test dummies are for men. These are actual studies of real world crashes involving all sorts of members of our community. Whoever has been involved in death or serious injury. Well, they're studies from Europe of real world crashes, and they were studies of basically linking the e-call data out of vehicles with the hospitalization data as to what the or whether they died or what the levels of injuries were. And so this took into account everybody, like old people, young people, males, females, others. It was all, yeah, it's all part of mixed into this. This is a representative sample of society. Well, it's a representative sample of people involved in crashes in society. But yes, your point in there around crash test dummies is absolutely right, that they are designed on the 85th percentile male. So certainly some vehicle force design sort of decisions made specifically around males. I'm going to do a couple more things, and then I'll give you a break, and you can go fill up your coffee and things. But I'll just cover off a couple of things, and then I'll give you a little exercise to do, and then plenty of time to do it and fill up with a coffee. This diagram you might have seen, and it's the traditional way of thinking about crash causation. So about every 5 years, someone around the world does another major crash causation study, and usually they'll, you know, get a PhD out of it, or they'll it'll be some massively funded study, which basically will take, yeah, they always try and get bigger as well, 5,000 crashes, and do in-depth root cause analysis of crash causation. These studies are immense, and they are done by absolutely brilliant academics. And they just keep spitting out the same outcomes, which is to say that the road user, and in this 2003 study, it just happened to be drivers that they were looking at, but it pretty much works across the board. Now, the road user is the cause of somewhere in all these studies between about 88% and 95% of crashes on the road. They're the cause, their failure. And the vehicles and the roads sort of overlap in some of those. And very occasionally the roads play this, you know, the role in their own right, major deficiency, and the vehicles in a much smaller way. So this diagram is a bit of the bane of my existence in road safety often, because the natural response to that is to say, well, we know where to focus our attention then, don't we? You focus your attention at the biggest cause of the problem. We found the root cause, now let's try and fix it. And the thing is that we just know that that is the hardest thing to fix. We get the least least value out of fixing it, which we can't do anyway. It's unsustainable because we get a whole new set of these humans all the time. And what we need to change our thinking to is that was a system failure, because inevitably the driver was going to fail. Of course, we know that, right? But the system didn't intervene, didn't pick up the slack of the human. Now, Austroads, and I took these diagrams out of Austroads, had driver excess and driver inexperience sitting outside here. I would just put them in. I mean, they're just system failures as well. If that driver's been able to get out there and do those sorts of things. So we need to alter our way of thinking, because the easiest thing you will ever have in your career if you're in road safety is the ability to blame the road user. It's easy. It's so easy. But we don't get benefit out of that. We don't progress. We don't actually see reductions in our trauma levels. Yeah, we can get, well, we do get small reductions. Anyway, somebody asked that question around, well, what are there different types of errors? And we do categorize them: slips, lapses, mistakes, unintentional violations, and what we put in is just deliberate violations. A couple of big studies on this showed around 70% of death and serious injury in Aotearoa is above the line there. Generally, people trying to go about their business in a safe-ish manner and not being able to do that. I mean, this is pretty significant, 30% down here. That 30%, though, is often seen as the full cause of road trauma. And so we need to challenge that. This one often has very different system changes required. So it's a very different thinking often. This one, like that, 70% of death and serious injury to our community. People generally trying to, go about their business and in a safe-ish manner. Like it's amazing. So that's where we can make some really significant improvements. Yes, so can I share that 70-30 split? So yep, it's a study from, so it was an Austroads report. It's called Error in the Transport System, or Analysing Error in the Road Transport System. It was a study done by the Centre for Automotive Safety Research at the University of Adelaide, and we'll put it into the research or resources folder of the learning management system. So what we're going to do, so does deliberate include all speeding? No, they did draw a threshold line in that report somewhere. So if excessive speeding was seen as deliberate, unintentional speeding or minor speeding was part of above the line. So that study includes New Zealand as well. Well, it did include New Zealand. But yeah, that's another thing, is that pretty much the studies around the world that looked into that are almost all the same. Like you take Sweden, for example, it comes out very close to that as well. And people often say, oh, we're nothing like Sweden, like we can't take their things. They're all these very goody two-shoes type people and will follow any rule that's put out there. Yeah, we're all pretty much the same. And societies tend to pretty much operate generally in these sort of molds. Yeah, and so 58% had alcohol of fatal crashes had alcohol as a factor. Yeah, so that's okay. That's an interesting specific. I should say that the CASO one was fatal and serious injuries. So there's that aspect of it. It was a little bit higher when you just looked at fatals. And yeah, I think you need to get into the specifics of what does that mean had alcohol as a factor. So yeah, we won't get caught up, like happy for people to read those reports and get their head around it. The simple point I'm trying to make with what I'm saying here is that extreme driver behavior style stuff is a significant problem, but it is not the overwhelming problem in road trauma. Anyway, what we want to do here is a little exercise. So we've got the traditional approach to road safety on the left, and where we're trying to go to with a safe system approach. And a poll will come up on your screen shortly, which will just have the sort of victim blaming and then the options of where we're trying to go to. And I'm going to give you a good 5 minutes now, and you can go through and you can click on the one you think. Some of them could go to multiple ways, but it's a nice way to sort of consolidate our thinking. So take 5 minutes, get yourself a coffee, have a stretch, have a few, put a few answers in, and we'll come back together shortly. Thanks. And seen some good guesses come in, or some, at least getting people having a bit of a think there about how we're trying to change things. Some of these could go to multiple ones, I think, so don't get too stressed about it. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there we go. We're going to have a look at the results. Having a quick flick through. I think most people have done pretty well. Let's get rid of those, actually. I'm just going to stop sharing those. And I'm going to do this on screen because I think most of you are starting to get your head around that. But we're going from victim blaming to more that idea of recognizing human error and minimizing its consequence, understanding that shared responsibility. From road user education and compliance as that absolute emphasis and what we're trying to achieve, but now it's that effort to create that overall forgiving system. Try to minimize crashes, but understand we've got to be forgiving of error. So crash reduction is more to that consequence and understanding that we're trying to reduce severe injury. So these 4 pillars action independently, and we're going to that multifaceted system. And the elements do interact jointly. And mobility safety balance to maximizing safe mobility, if that all makes sense. I do like Ian Cameron's comment in there, which is Ian Cameron from Western Australia. We need a paradigm shift in road safety policy to stop the road death epidemic, and we need it now. It is unrealistic to expect that education and enforcement alone will bring the needed step change. Even road users who know and follow the rules make mistakes. The safe system creates an environment where a simple mistake will no one kill people or seriously injure people, I should also say. So let's jump into a little bit of the road network. And some of you spend a lot of time looking at bits of road not dissimilar to this. But without knowing anything about the background of this newly installed barrier system in a narrow flush median there, let's jump in and pop into the chat some things that you think may have been major blockers to this project in its planning, development and design. Okay, so this is a barrier in central median. It was before that a barrier line, so just a line separating the 2 streams of traffic. And you can see now finally got the barrier system in. So there's another picture of it. What do you think were some of the major challenges in the planning, development and design of this? Pop them into the chat. I'll give out a few prizes, maybe to some that I find interesting or some that were big challenges. So over to you. Let's see. Okay, they're coming in thick and fast. It is like a lot of you have tried to put these systems in. Okay, let's have a look here. Available width of the corridor, absolutely. That's a good one. And I suppose it actually links in with a couple of the others there. So I think prize there for John straight off the bat. So yes, the embankments, and that all sort of feeds in with that. The deflection into live lanes, that was a fascinating one for me. Quinton, there's a prize there. So the number of design review and design committees associated with that barrier being struck and deflecting into a live lane halted the project for a significant amount of time. The width of this narrow median. And really, there's a lot of people who are saying, well, no, we can't do it because you're not getting the desired deflection. And their preference is to stick with a white line because that meets a standard, and this didn't. I think you can sort of see the sort of stupidity of that if you stand back and look at it, but it is where we found ourselves. Okay, property boundaries is a good one. Yes, engagement, lots of good stuff here. I won't get through them all. I'm just looking to see if there's any other ones. Vertical alignment's a good one, Harriet, prize there. So yeah, being able to design your barriers in a way for that vertical alignment and forward sight distance. Covis with motorbikes complaining about it. Yes, prize there. That was another big one. Accesses, Douglas, yep, prize there. Actually, I could give prizes out to everybody here, but I won't. I better stop myself. Kez will run out of prizes. Foundations. So lots of good engineering ones in there and lots of good other ones. I mean, we've got the thing to note is that this is a change to the way that we have been operating our roads and building our roads for a very, very long time. And it's not what people expect to see. Now we're getting more and more of it across New Zealand out there, but still people are reluctant to see this change. And change is a very hard thing to make happen. But what I want to say is that a traditional road safety audit on a job like this, I found to be an inhibitor of us getting this change through. Now, the reason for that is that the road safety audit in its own pure state simply looks at a treatment like this and suggests and identifies risks and maybe suggests ways that you could, alter those risks. But the mandate of or the requirements of a road safety audit is not to make any commentary around how beneficial this will be. It's simply to point out, when you build this, here are some problems it could create. And so when you get these road safety audit reports for something like this, they're just a little list of issues and the kind of things that you're putting up there. And that can give the impression that these are high-risk projects, very dangerous, all these problems. There's no reporting of the huge road safety benefit we see from this. Whereas now that we have safe system assessments, or at least we front load a road safety audit with a safe system assessment and combine the two to be called a safe system audit, we see the ability to show the benefit of this in that safe system assessment process. And then we are able to list all of these things and sort of meaningfully look for ways to lessen those risks. But the overall huge benefit is clearly displayed. I think that's a pretty exciting takeaway about why are we doing safe system assessments when we've had road safety audits for a long time. That's one big one. Oh. Yeah, and certainly there were other things like maintenance, can we maintain that? Can we maintain the road next to it? Also, it gets hit. And there's a nice little video, which will be in the learning management system, about sort of talking to some of the people involved in this strike and the fact that they're celebrating the fact that the barrier pretty much they're sure saved their lives, which is an interesting one. But to me, it's I say it's an interesting one because mostly if public are talking about infrastructure, they're getting angry at something. To me, it's a great example of safe system in action because somebody fell asleep and they left their lane. The system catered for that and made it so nobody was killed or seriously injured. If that barrier wasn't there, they had gone into the other lane, head-on crash, people would have been killed. Well, it's just no question that the driver was at fault. They were driving, they were tired, actually knew that they were tired, but they elected to drive. It's pretty easy to blame and walk away from it, but safe system just has that system sitting around there to cater for that. We're not encouraging it, but we're just acknowledging it's going to happen. So if we look at these elements of the system a little bit, I'll just sort of break them down into the users of the system and the fact that I've said they're, very hard to get anything meaningful, but we do know some things work in altering behaviour and getting better road use. By no means is it going to get us to where we want to be with road safety, but we can and we should continue to do some stuff around education, encouragement, enforcement, and the licensing systems that we provide. Certainly in education, we know that obviously educating young people is the most beneficial, and they can set them up nicely. They can be also little Trojan horses with messages. If you tell them the importance of wearing a seatbelt in the car, they often take that back to their parents as well. Young drivers and young riders are particularly at risk. And what we know works is really those hours on the road, getting them into the safest possible vehicle. That works really well. What we know doesn't work are things like advanced driver training courses. So anything where you're learning to get out of skids and skid pan training and high-speed braking techniques and the like, that increases the chance that they'll be killed or seriously injured. Pretty much one of the best research things around the world, actually. And in terms of road safety, but that's a classic for the community thinking that is the answer. And they send, if everybody could drive like Michael Schumacher, we wouldn't have any deaths or serious injury. Absolutely not. That's absolutely not the case. And in fact, the counterintuitive nature of that is, well, I should explain it. They basically go into the course, they come out with all these new skills, which they believe will protect them, and they increase their risk taking. and the small bit of improvement they get is absolutely swamped by the increased risk taking. There are some driver training courses that either appear to be neutral or may have some benefit, but they're more classroom style courses, understanding how to perceive risk in the road network and adjust accordingly. Yeah, education through a whole school system is a good thing, but also understanding how people receive messages. And this is a bit into the behavioural change initiatives, but certainly if we talk to individuals about their risk, they don't believe us. So let me explain this. This is mobile phone use. So if we were to tell this gentleman, if you use a mobile phone, you'll be involved in a crash. Using a phone while driving increases your chance of being killed or seriously injured. He doesn't believe us. He'll go, nah, I'm a good driver and I only do it when it's safe. And he's probably saying I've been doing it 10 years and haven't had an issue. So this is all just, for other people and or it's just revenue raising or whatever it is. And to a degree, I kind of agree with him, as bad as that sounds. And the reason I agree with him, because the chance of an individual being killed or seriously injured associated with mobile phone use is minuscule. But that's not what we deal with in safety. We deal with the collective. And this absolutely minuscule risk, you have to add all of those up for your whole of community. And you get a significant risk associated with using a mobile phone and driving. But for the individual, it's not. And so what we do is we often talk to an individual like they're a collective. And they just switch off. We do with speed all the time. Oh, we've reduced the speed from 100 to 80 on this road for your safety. It's just like, what? You've done it for revenue raising. Or this is ridiculous. This is for all those people who don't know how to drive. You should, so it's exactly the same thing. You don't want to talk about that. But in this wonderful little ad, it's saying if you text and drive, your kid will text and drive. And that actually changes the whole perspective on that, that issue. And it actually proves quite effective in reducing mobile phone use, at least while others or kids are in the car. So that's a good one. So some things that work, and these are in the notes, whole school approach is very good. Combining with partner activities like police initiatives and the like work really well. Lots of support for community education, as in community-driven approaches, and any graduated licensing system, so putting restrictions on as people enter into the driving task, targeting parents, especially motivated groups, parents being the big one, and getting them to alter things so they create systems that are safer for their young drivers, and action programs, which I can talk about a little bit. What doesn't work? I think I've covered some of these. Fear tactics don't tend to change behavior. So scaring people, you don't see driver behavior change. Well, actually, I lie. You do see driver behavior changes in the absolute most safest drivers we have. So maybe there's something to that. Fear tactics can be useful sometimes, but it's useful when you want to get legislative change or put in big changes to the system. But at a behavioural level, you don't see much. Skill-based driver training I talked about doesn't work. In fact, is often the other way around. One-off events, driver simulators, car racing or go-karting clubs, well, they're pretty much the same as the skill-based stuff. Information only, a bit like fear tactics, but telling people how many people have been killed or seriously injured in an area or like It's not going to change individuals' behaviour, but again, can set a platform for legislative change. And I like this diagram from New South Wales or New South Wales or Victoria, I forget. They both use the same diagram, but so when there is a learner driver with a supervising driver, there is a very low amount of crashes at a raw crash level or a crashes per 100,000 kilometres or vehicle kilometres traveled, right? As soon as they're out on their own, it spikes and it drops down, but even 8 years and it sort of flattens out after that. We never see a driver as safe as these people with pretty much no experience. So that's interesting, isn't it? There's an immediate dispelling of any ideas that being some highly skilled driver is the requirement. Yes, you're going to get improvements with some driving skills, but certainly it's an interesting bit of info. Let's have a look here. Yep, so Chris is making a good point. I mean, that you get into the analysis of that as to where they're driving and the like, but it's interesting little case study. Yeah, so lots of good comments coming in, which is good. Thank you. Yeah, so Peter's put in there around that exposure. Yeah, as I say, it works both for vehicle kilometres travelled and raw numbers. Yeah, skill-based driver training in secondary schools is bad. I mean, you can do things, as I said, sit them in a classroom, talk about how to not get in dangerous situations, how to perceive a road network, what to look for, all of those sort of things. Yeah, don't teach them to drive, to get in out of high speeds or any, advanced braking techniques or anything like that. It's just going to increase their chance of being killed. So incentivizing campaigns show a lot of benefit, which is essentially paying people to drive safely, which sounds a bit odd. But yeah, if they go through their probationary period without any infringements, they get a free license, and those sort of things seem to have some sort of benefits. Specific behavior advertising is important. Like, if we just generally say drive safely, it's somewhat meaningless. But if you can narrow that into a specific behavior, you're in much better situation. So rest every 2 hours, or when you're driving, or those sort of things. Very hard to evaluate marketing and road safety behavioural campaigns. Very hard. Recall is often just what they use. So do people remember it? And they tell you they take action, but that's very hard to understand. Comedy is quite effective. New Zealand does that better than I reckon anybody in the world. So you know a lot of your ads that resonate really well. And again, I've popped some of those into the learning management system. But we're trying to really change that culture and perspective of road safety, and really get people questioning why we just accept what we have out there. So yeah, you see some people talking about other people make mistakes. So we've got one of those ideas. This isn't a New Zealand ad. The South Australian government seems to have borrowed it. Other people make mistakes. I do like Graham. Graham is a life-size sculpture who looks scarily like a sort of human, but is the only person designed to survive on the forces on the road. So students get to look at it and start to question why so much force is possible out there, and then they get to redesign the road system to make Graham more human. It's a nice little initiative. Enforcement is a very important part of the system, but it's just a sort of a supporter of the system. And I could talk for a long time on enforcement, but strategically thinking through the enforcement effort is so important, and thinking through the use of specific deterrence and general deterrence. So specific deterrence is if somebody is caught for something, the idea is that they shouldn't do that again because they were caught for it. And general deterrence is the ability to be caught for something that you know you could be caught for something, so not doing it. And visual presence has some good effect in terms of influencing behaviour in a certain ring around the where they've seen a police officer. It's called the halo effect, but you start to drop that off fairly quickly afterwards. We really have got wonderful opportunities in enforcement with technology, cameras, point-to-point cameras, but also even in-car enforcement techniques or control techniques such as alcohol interlocks, speed controls, and we certainly see things the technology is not holding us back on. Things like speed interlock, which I think should be some of the things that we should be moving towards, which basically, this is my government car 15 years ago, which was telling me what speed zone I was in, beeping at me if I go over the speed limit. And when I got back to the office, I could print out a report of how many times I exceeded the speed limit and where that occurred 15 years ago. I mean, the ability for us to do that is absolutely there. It's only, only got way better from this. We could put in place speed interlocks for people who are repeat speed offenders. We could simply monitor them the whole time. Very easy. We could even restrict their vehicle over, even give them a bit of tolerance above the speed limit, but not the ability to excessively. These are all possible if there's a political will to do it, which often is a challenge. Vehicles, I'll move a little bit quick because I just want to cover off a few things before we end. Vehicles will eventually put us all out of a job, and that's wonderful. I'm so excited for that. It's not going to be anytime soon, but the vehicle safety features keep integrating into the system without us, being as alert to it. But certainly things like ANCAP have been great, where we see encouragement of safety features in vehicles. But there's big limitations in the physics and what a vehicle can do. So take a side impact pole test. There it is. I'll give a prize for the person who can tell me what speed the side impact pole test happens at. So it's a vehicle slid into a pole, and the dummy, and this is a male dummy in these crash tests. So it can't have like level 3 serious injuries exerted on it. What speed do you think that happens at? God, I think Chris is there, 30. So it recently went from 29 kilometers per hour up to 32 kilometers per hour. I mean, that's all we're talking about with the physics of the side of a vehicle being able to withstand. So when you think about how fast we drive around trees and power poles and those sorts of things, and acknowledging that people are going to leave the road, the vehicle itself in terms of management of energy is a long way from where it would need to be. That's pretty interesting. Lots of good stuff though now, thinking about not only occupants of vehicles, but how do we protect vulnerable road users being struck, so pedestrians and cyclists, and bonnets popping up and airbags on the outside of the vehicle, and some pretty exciting times. And the question, I suppose, when do we get this vehicle that doesn't have a steering wheel? Sorry, clarification question. Is the 32 test for fatal injuries only? No, it's a serious injury threshold. I think it's a level 3 serious. It's pretty high-end serious injury, but Yeah. You can have a look at the ANCAP test protocols. They're publicly available if you want more details on it. When will we get this vehicle? It's hard to know. I mean, there are level 4 automated vehicles pottering around watersides and things with no steering wheels. But when do we see wide scale deployment of this? Well, we'd need time to, for the fleet to turn over. We need a huge amount of legislative change. And it's very, it's sort of very unknown as to when it will be. It's a long time away. There's a huge amount of death and serious injury to occur in between this, and how we sort of manage that transition is fascinating. In a safe system assessment, you get asked some very generic questions around automated vehicles and vehicle safety features, and what is your infrastructure going to help a vehicle of the future? I mean, it's such head-scratching stuff. It's sort of put in there to acknowledge that we now need to start thinking about designing roads for these sorts of vehicles, as well as the existing humans that are trying to navigate it, and trying to understand what features we can, are really important in road design. Wouldn't automation also create new safety issues around computer failure and the like? Yep, there's a whole lot of things to work out through that. I think you'll find that definitely the computers will fail so few times compared to humans failing, that you take it every time. The public, gets pretty irate at that though, usually, when a computer fails and somebody's killed. When a human fails and somebody's killed, that's run of the mill. And so you sort of think about how that all plays out. These are long conversations to have over a coffee or something. But you'll see lots of vehicles, entering that give the illusion that the driver is driving. One got the leg. The vehicles brake by themselves. They let you think you're driving, and then when they need to, they start to take control. And so we will see less in severity. So that leg hit is one where the vehicle did brake, it slowed down, and then it struck at a more minor pace. Speed. Let me talk about speed. Some just reminders of absolute basics here. Speed and crash impact are not a linear relationship. I think the easiest way to explain that is here. If we've got 60 kilometers per hour as travel speed, and you've got something at 45 meters that steps out, reaction time, braking distance touches it. But if we just go up 10 kilometers per hour, it hits at 46 kilometers an hour. Okay, not 10 kilometers an hour. So there's your indication initially as to why we see that the non-linear relationship. And in fact, when you actually then overlay that with those crash severity curves that I talked about earlier, you start to get an understanding that change in speed has a power relationship with fatal and serious and other crashes. A fourth power relationship with fatal. So very small changes in speed have significant changes in the fatal crash outcomes, and again, significant in serious injury, and other crashes start to more sort of flatten in like that. So if we can gather small reductions in speed, we can see them magnify out for our highest end severity crashes as well. The public has a just fascinating relationship with speed and speed limits and speed management, and some data and information in here around the public's perception on speed limits. So this is actually Tasmanian data, but we do see lots of different things come out from around New Zealand, around Australia, and around the world. And again, there's a lot of correlation. People aren't seeing things that differently. They've got a reluctance to believe that speed limits are going to reduce crashes. And it's a big challenge we've got. They can understand basic physics, that if a speed limit is reduced, and I suppose that we're thinking that resulting speeds might come down, the severity of a crash will be less. That's quite interesting. I was updating the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 3 not that long ago. I chucked in this diagram because I thought it kind of encapsulates an interesting part of Safe System. This was from Europe. But saying, understand your vehicles that are out there, understand the roads that you've got out there, and understand, what is the level of road user behavior and the like. And then just filter it all through an appropriate speed, and you've got a safe road transport system. Speed is that influential. Like it will adjust whatever you've got to a safe transport system. It's a very hard thing to actually do on the ground, but in theory, you're well placed. And, that can play out not just to lower speeds, although lower speeds are going to be the answer a lot of the time. But I often say that a racetrack is a very safe system aligned place. It's got, great vehicle safety features. It's got a road system that is designed for crashes and designed for managing energy in crashes. It's got road users who are very alert and compliant and all of that as well. But in this end, we see that speeds can be very high and we can expect very safe outcomes. We do need to remember that speed can be influenced through infrastructure and/or speed limits. And infrastructure is far more effective and more accepted. If you change the road environment, people drive slower because they want to, or that's how they perceive the road environment. You're in a far better position than putting a red circle around a black number. Explaining why speed limits are in place can be quite effective. And vulnerable road users are generally well accepted as a reason for us to protect using speed limit reduction. I'll talk a little bit about this more later, but I just want to cover off a couple of things before we get to the end of today's sort of introductory session. And yeah, little prize there for somebody who can tell me a formula for risk. I'm sure some of you have got that at your fingertips, no doubt. I've lost my chat. Give me a second here. Okay, consequence times probability, that'll do. Thomas first in there. So likelihood times consequence, or probability times consequence, or probability times severity. What's the chance of a crash? How bad will it be? It's the same with like financial risk or environmental risk. What's the chance of bad thing happening, and then how bad, what's the magnitude of badness? When we do a safe system assessment, we do this little interesting thing is to draw out from likelihood exposure, so the number of people exposed to it, and then the inherent likelihood of crash for, I suppose, an individual. And I'll explain that in a lot more detail as we go through this course. To do a safe system assessment, you will analyze and quantify how many people are exposed to a crash, what is the chance of that crash happening, and how bad will it be? And you multiply those out. When we talk about exposure, I mean, if we think about how we can alter exposure, Blocking off roads, blocking off access to conflict points like this level crossing where it's a bit hard to see, there's a mound of dirt and the road closed there. That's removed the exposure to the crashes. Nobody is exposed to that crash because no vehicles are going through there and exposed to those conflict points. Or separating vulnerable road users from vehicle traffic. We've separated, they're not exposed to the crash with the vehicle. Okay, there might be bike-to-bike crashes or bike-to-pedestrian crashes we might think about, but that vehicle-to-bike or vehicle-to-pedestrian crashes has been removed in that area. Likelihood is all sorts of things we've been doing for a long time. Everything from line marking, audio tactile, edge and center line, wide center lines, lighting, sealed shoulders, delineation, horizontal vertical alignment. All of these things are trying to stop the crash happening in the first place. Even traffic signals. Traffic signals are a likelihood reducing factor to reduce the chance of the crash happening by controlling when or telling people when they can and can't go. The severity of crash is very much only able to be influenced by the speed, the angle, the amount of protection that is provided around the road user. So slowing vehicles through conflict points and changing the angles of crashes, or redirecting the energy and dissipating it over time, such as hitting a barrier system and running that energy out over a lane. These are great ways to reduce the severity of crashes. We won't do the quiz. That's where we'll pick up next time. But I want to show you just a little bit into the learning management system about what you'll do. So that was just a little introduction to exposure, likelihood, and severity. And we, as I say, we'll be using that a lot throughout the course. Okay, Kez, hopefully, can you see my other screen?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so you will you'll get yourself into the learning management system. I might just change myself here to sorry, I'm just going to change myself to a student to see what you will see. And we've got the course there, and you'll see there's the resource folder here. And so you'll see there's some reference documents that you'll be able to have a look at, and that's where we'll place anything that we talked about in there. You can see there, we've got a series of different documents. This one, what does work for young drivers and why, that actually has the research and evidence behind some of those points I was making about road user behavior, and advanced driver training and those sorts of things. And we will put in there those reports that were mentioned that people wanted to access. So then each of the modules will appear, and you'll see there the presentation, so the PDF of the slides, some videos that I sort of mentioned. There's a video or two in there. You can have a look at those. There's the quiz, which we'll click on shortly. Oh, there's the Mythbusters episode that we talked about, so you can watch that, the crash courses. I'll pop this in here, which is a comparison between Road Safety Audit, Safe System Assessment, and IRAP, or the International Road Assessment Program, because there's a lot of confusion out there as we get these more and more techniques. I thought it was worth explaining those three. New Zealand's combined Road Safety Audit and Safe System Assessment, which I think is a good approach in theory. And then you've got your quiz. So you click on the quiz, and then you'll have 3 attempts at it if you want. And you will see there that there's a bit of an administrative question, but then you've got questions, they're multiple choice or drop downs, and they're just covering what we covered off in today's session. Down here it says, how many times did Wally the Wombat appear? You've got a bit of a margin of error there as well to play with. And that's all we ask you to do from today's session. In some of the future modules, you'll have an assignment to upload or something like that. But for now, I think that covers things off pretty well. Are there any questions, Kez, I can take anything anybody would like to chat about.
Coming in, I was just going to mention that it's an 80% pass mark. So,
Sorry, I can't quite hear that.
So I was going to mention it's an 80% pass mark, but so yeah, and obviously to get in touch with the training team if you wanted any additional help or had any questions. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Kez. Yeah, so just reiterating that, it was 80% pass mark, and yes, of course, if you maybe have a go at it, and then if you don't do well at all, and you feel I need to talk to somebody about a few of these, get in contact with us. We're happy to chat through it. Good. All right, we'll log in a little bit early for a chance to win a prize before next session. We'll pick up from here and we'll get into a bit of, I suppose, more of the infrastructure assessing, a bit more into that. I wanted to cover off broadly sort of the philosophical stuff first, and happy to chat to any of you more about this sort of stuff at any point. Thanks, Kez.
Thanks,
and we'll end the session there. Thanks, everybody. Bye.